Now, how our increasingly wireless world is affecting our social behavior, especially among the generation that's grown up with smartphones.
Look, there's your books. You wanna read a book with Dad now? You want an iPad?
Oh, not right now. Mama will bring the iPad back later, okay?
At our fingertips, we have access to a sea of information, entertainment, and virtual connections that were unfathomable just a couple of decades ago. But at what cost? There's an irony in the heart of our interconnected world. How has our relentless pursuit of digital content reshaped the fabric of our daily lives, our relationships, and even the wiring of our brains? And can we do anything about it?
Welcome back to LED Live, everybody. Today we are going to discuss what happens in your brain when you watch and pay attention to all this media. And we have an expert in the house, Scott Ritsema. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Scotty.
I'm excited to have this guy here because for years, I feel like we've kind of traveled around and visited very similar spots. And people would always approach us and be like, hey, have you guys heard of Scott Ritsema? So I'm excited to have you as an expert. How did you get into this stuff, by the way?
Well, first of all, it's the opposite direction. I feel like I've arrived at a destination here at Little Light Studios. It's an honor to be with you guys. And it actually, people were handing me your DVDs back, 2010, 11, and Magic Kingdom. And I'm teaching in a classroom, teaching Bible at this time. I used to teach history, government, economics, but I'm teaching Bible and helping my young people, by the Spirit of God grow in Christ. And the media is interrupting that, and they're getting immersed in really dark stuff and addiction. And so somebody gives me your DVDs. I'm like, man, this is incredible. And I got more to say about this. So I just canceled the Bible curriculum. And for 2 weeks, I talked to my students about their media use. Right. What is science telling us? How do we understand the agendas? Learning about history, propaganda, mind control. And the local pastors are like, hey, could you preach that at our church? Because we want that as a sermon. And then a big camp meeting conference says, hey, can you do a seminar on that? And the Lord opens door after door after that. And the curriculum was called Media on the Brain. And then the sermon was called Media on the Brain. And then the camp meeting seminar was called Media on the Brain. And somebody comes up to me, you're skilled AV people here, incredible equipment and technology you have. And this guy comes up, he goes, you ought to do this and put it on DVD. These seminars that you're teaching ought to be out there. And that's where churches were inviting to do it after that camp meeting seminar. So that's kind of how we got into this, and been at 400 plus churches over the last 12 years. God's opened the door to really bring an awakening to people about not just what are the effects, but what are the solutions. So we do other seminars on parenting and true education. I love to talk about current events and prophecy, but it's good to be here with you guys. This conversation is exciting to me.
Praise the Lord. It's really neat to see how God, when he opens up a door and you are willing to walk through that door, I mean, things happen that you never would have dreamed in a million years. I mean, I never thought in a million years I'd be sitting here discussing Bible topics every day. This has been a joy in my life. And I know you have blessed so many people with your ministry. So I'm excited to hear about this. If you guys haven't checked out Scott Ritsema's ministry, we'll put a link in the description below, but he has a lot of information. You're going to hear a little bit about it today. But let's just kind of break into this. Talk a little bit about what's going on, because people I think have a hard time separating that it's entertainment and what does this really have an impact upon me?
Well, it's not. There are agendas, right? The Bible says, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. Don't be conformed to this world. Okay. So just entertainment is a very surface level, really a deceptive. That's the mask, that it's harmless, that it's not going to affect us. In fact, when you get whistleblowers out of big tech, out of the entertainment industry, they admit they have agendas. That agenda might be according to a certain worldview, or even just a corporate business model. Like the CEO of HBO came out and it's like, we're in the business of building addicts, building video addicts.
We want to build as many addicts as we can across as many franchises as we can, right? So for somebody girls is their obsession, and that's why they subscribe to HBO. For somebody else, it's boxing. For somebody else, it's Thrones. For somebody else, it's Silicon Valley. And the key for us is making sure that we're building up addicts over time across our different genres, because unlike David's business, we're not selling advertising, we're selling subscriptions.
He just said it just bluntly like
Wow.
that. Addiction is a serious issue. It's a mental health condition. In the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual of the psychiatry community, they list media addictions there now.
Right.
And then you had the one of the presidents, the first president of Facebook, Sean Parker, founding it with Mark Zuckerberg. He came out maybe like 5-6 years ago, and he said, we deliberately were giving them a little dopamine hit here, give them a little dopamine hit there to keep them on the platform, keep them doing what we need them to do. And he says, it was Mark, it was me, it was this guy on that platform. He names all these people. You remember this quote? And he goes, they did it. We did it on purpose.
Yeah.
And we knew what we were doing, and we did it anyway.
Speaking at an Axios event Wednesday, Parker, who worked with Mark Zuckerberg to develop Facebook, with a bombshell claim, saying the site was intentionally built to hook you.
That thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. It's a social validation feedback loop because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
The 38-year-old mogul admits he, along with other pioneers of social media, knew what they were doing.
We understood this consciously, and we did it anyway. It literally changes your relationship with society, with each other.
It's crazy to think that all those guys too, they were basically in the same class at Stanford. You know, it was called like the Facebook class or something. You have all these Silicon Valley startups, and they're listening to I don't remember what class it was, but they were listening to psychology or something about operant conditioning and all these kind of techniques. Yeah, B.F. Skinner. And it just kind of clicked with them like, hey, we could use this for media. And the next thing you know, they're like all billionaires, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that hits on the nail on the head. It's all boiling down to money. If you just follow the money, like they're doing this for money. The more that they can show more eyeballs are on this thing for this amount of time, they can go to the advertisers and be like, hey, look, if you just put your advertisement right here, X amount of people are going to soak this in.
It's really interesting. You know, I say the same thing too. You talked about how people they don't think it has an effect on them, right? We hear that all the time. And it's really that cognitive dissonance that we all can be subject to, right? And what way do we take that? And I kind of see two paths with cognitive dissonance. You're either going to reinforce what it is that you believe and why you believe it and why you're going the right direction, which leads to self-justification. Or you're going to look at the data and you're going to think about it and you're say, you know what? There's a change that has to be made there. And you're going to go down the path of reformation. That's really your two options.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Romans 12 verse 2 presents those two, conformed or transformed. You'll be conformed to this world or transformed by the renewing of your minds. And that's the path of redemption. That's the path of wholeness and healing and joy. And God wants to free us from addictions, free us from, when we get into the discussion about dopamine, what's happening in the brain there is actually a flood of dopamine unnaturally, like by use of a drug, like by use of pornography or other media addictions. The brain gets flooded with it, and dopamine receptors just start shutting down. And then you become dependent on that high level of input, or more frequent, or a new novel experience that then delivers that. And if you don't have that, I mean, I've got brain scans in the seminars where you see the pleasure receptors starting to become numbed and muted. And that person just doesn't have as much joy and happiness. And it's like, God wants us to have joy. We're not saying don't enjoy life. We're saying these designed entertainments are not actually designed to deliver sustainable happiness and joy. A high followed by a crash, which leads to a downward spiral. Every addiction there is brings greater depression.
And it's only one of many chemicals that are at play. You have other hormones and neurotransmitters that are at play. You have endorphins, you have enkephalins, you have serotonin, you have oxytocin, all of these are at play at the same time. It's not just dopamine acting, it's all of them acting in concert. If you look at a Hollywood script, you can follow it with the biochemical reactions that are happening in your body and in your brain. And it's amazing. It's essentially biochemical manipulation.
Absolutely.
Well, and all of that is natural.
So
it is
Is
natural.
that response does it come from only synthetic sources, or can you find that in nature? Like, do we have that natural response in good contexts?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Nature, family, accomplishments, doing hard tasks and getting the payoff, eating healthy natural foods, doing good for others, training, and I'm going to run a 5K or a half marathon, and then it pays off. You get the runner's high. I mean, God designed us so that when we follow the path he designed for us, that brings the fruit of the Spirit of joy. Satan is not better at pleasure than God is.
Right.
That's a lie, right? And then you look at people like Nicholas Kardaras, who wrote the book Glow Kids, and he points out in there, he's treated hundreds of heroin addicts and screen addicts. And he says it is easier to treat a heroin addict than a true screen addict.
Wow.
So when we talk about addiction, this is not hyperbole. We're not just throwing a term out there. This is clinical reality. It's in the psychiatry Bible, they call it, the diagnostics. I mentioned that, the statistical manual where they diagnose these addictions. And you can tell, you take the 6-question survey, and like if I don't feel normal without it, and if I hide the extent of the problem, and you can figure out, okay, do I have a problem with this?
I mean, you just look at those videos of the little kids that get their iPad taken away from them, and it's like World War III meltdown.
Right, but what's the root? Like, what's the crux of the difference between the two? Because if you're drawn to media, right? So you get the same dopamine hit with using your phone, as in like being in nature and all of that. However, you're addicted, so to speak, with the media. You have that tantrum response, but not necessarily nature. It's the same natural hormones, but a different response. What's the crux of that?
Quantity and stimulant. It's being a stimulant like cocaine, like caffeine. The brain takes that in as a quick fix. It's the easy route versus you got to work at it and then the payoff happens. And the frontal lobe is engaged. With Life God's Way, you're engaging frontal lobe activity, and then that brings activity to the pleasure reward circuit because you followed the correct route. When you target the pleasure hit, the nucleus accumbens gets hit with these stimulants, whether media or drugs, and no activity in the frontal lobe.
From a chemical perspective, what we do, and this is in many areas of life, is we increase, or we're subject to increases in concentration beyond their normal limits.
Yes.
So a good analogy, for example, is, are there natural sugars in fruits? Yeah. Yes. Is there salt naturally found occurring, sodium chloride and potassium chloride found naturally in potatoes? Yes.
But high doses.
What about, is there fats in avocados? Yes. And coconut, right? But once all of those are concentrated, and especially all three together, like the trifecta they call it, which is what McDonald's does, right? Increase the fat, increase the salt, increase the sugar. Now they're in disproportionate levels of what you're supposed to be getting, and your brain just goes nuts. It's like, oh my, I've got to have more of this, right? It's the same kind of thing that's going on with media. It's in disproportionate levels than you're normally supposed to experience.
The proof's in the pudding, though. If you sit and you look at the people that would binge watch something, right? How do you feel after you binge watch it? I mean, nobody's like, I feel amazing. You go run a 5K. Like, honestly, just compare the two together. You go outside, you go camping. You're going to feel totally different than sitting there watching TV.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't even need to like open a science book. Just like literally, like I feel better doing this than that.
That's so true. And going to the diet thing, the average American consumes, for every 1 calorie that we are eating from a whole plant food source, we are consuming 1 of those versus 25 of the everything else, the refined sugars, the refined fats, the refined foods. And that is making us less happy. It's the standard American diet, the SAD diet, SAD.
I love it.
It's not just killing us, but you become more depressed when you eat that way. When you eat servings of fruit and vegetables, you add that to your diet, there's a measurable boost of happiness for each serving of fruit and vegetables that you add to your diet. And they measured it up to 8 additional. So you crowd out that with something better and you start feeling better. The average young person that I've surveyed, for every 1 hour that they are in God's word or in spiritual food of any kind, 25 hours of entertainment media. So it's 25-to-1 ratio, the same as the standard American diet. Going to have the same effect on our happiness.
I remember when my dad, when I was little, he was like, if you want to watch something, you have to equal whatever you read the Bible.
That's like, I'll eat a cookie now and then a salad later.
So as a kid, we were like, we'll go outside, Dad.
Right.
Wow. I want to go back to the argument and Keith brought up about, this doesn't affect me. Comparing it to people have different reactions when it comes to addiction, different thresholds, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right word. Like you can smoke once, someone can smoke once and be fine. Someone else, they smoke once and they're hooked for 10 years or what have you. Is that the same when it comes to media?
Problem is principles are built on averages and norms. They're not built on extremes. Right. So you don't build the case on the person's that's like, well, my brain just operates. I know somebody like this, actually. He's very intelligent. Like we're talking, he probably could have gone to MIT. His brain just works very differently. You can sit him down in front of entertainment media and he just can't stop thinking and analyzing the thing the whole time it's going on, to the point where it would like be annoying. If you want to enjoy something, it would be annoying to sit down with him and go through that, because he's just constantly analyzing the thing and thinking, and his frontal lobe just isn't shutting down. It's like it's not being bypassed like a normal individual. But you don't build those principles off of the extreme case, right? Yeah. Are there people that are like that? Yes, but they're going to be fewer and farther between.
Yeah.
Also, I like to think of addiction and every mental health measure, depression versus happiness. I like to think of it as like on a spectrum. The best attention span, the worst attention span, the most peace, the most anxiety. If you look at every mental health measure on a spectrum, rather than just seeing, this point on the spectrum over, it's called a certain...
That's happiness.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you have depression.
Yeah.
You have, there's no blood test, there's no brain scan that establishes exactly what these conditions are. But every one of us wants more peace, less anxiety, more happiness, less depression, more attention span, less low attention span, and less addiction. So where am I in the spectrum on any one of these is not really the most important question. The question is, what am I doing to take myself the right direction on the spectrum? More nature exposure, more face-to-face relationships, physical activities, doing real things. I've got a session in the Media Mind seminar called How to Be Human Again. It's like, we got to rediscover that. And so, if the more of this we're doing, even if somebody's like, well, it doesn't affect me as bad as it does somebody else, as badly as it does, Joe down the street. Well, is this choice that you're making helping you go the direction you want to go? And it's not a mandate. It's not a judgment. It's not somebody coming in and telling you what you got to do. It's just, you got to think through it for yourself and evaluate your own life.
And I always think that idea is kind of a logical fallacy anyway, because if it didn't affect you at all, you wouldn't do it. Right? So why are you watching that? Because it's supposed to bring this temporary happiness and joy, like if it's a comedy or something, because you want to laugh, right? You can't say it doesn't affect me. What they're trying to say, or at least what I think people are trying to say, is ultimately, when I sit down and watch something, it is not going to fundamentally change what I believe as a Christian. I think that's what people are really saying. It's
one
not
way
going to change my beliefs.
One way for them to figure that out is to go 10 days or 30 days without. Because you can't say it doesn't affect me unless you have something to compare it with, right? So you do a fast and you say, I'm gonna establish a Bible study program. I'm going to commit myself to this devotional activity. There are things I know God is asking me to do that I've been hesitating. I'm gonna do those instead of entertainment. I'm gonna do a fast from social media. And then at the end of 30 days or 40 days or even just 10 days, it's like a new set of lenses. When you go to the optometrist, you may think you're seeing fine. I don't need glasses necessarily. But then when you get to the third line down, he's like, read that one. Wait, I'm supposed to be able to read that? I guess I am seeing a little blurry. And you find that out by a test.
This has happened to me recently.
Have you? Yeah, really.
I can't stand glasses.
Have you heard about that the poll they did with college students? And they're like, just a simple poll. And they're like, okay, you're not going to have your phone for 24 hours. And they measure their anxiety levels. They haven't even removed the phone. Anxiety levels go up. Just the thought of not having their phone for 24 hours, let alone actually removing it from their lives, made their anxiety levels go up.
So is the phone the solution to anxiety then? Or is that just a sign of an addiction?
It's a sign of addiction. That's what I always tell people. It's like, if you want to know you're addicted, put it away for a week.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think people are genuinely thinking that, like I'm set in my ways and there's not much that you're going to dislodge in me. And this was very interesting when we interviewed a hypnotherapist for one of our earlier projects. And he said there's these things in your life that are very hard to dislodge. Your belief in God, your family dynamics. There's a number of things that pretty much nobody in this room is going to tell you something that's going to change that. But the hypnotherapist said it is possible to change your ideas, and it's not changing like what you think about them, it's how you feel about them. And if they can attach a negative feeling to that person or that thing, so like let's say your mom, you've got these beliefs that only you understand about your mom. I'm not going to tell you anything different about your mom. But if I go, your mom left you at school one time, and how'd that make you feel? Like she forgot about you. If you attach enough of those negative feelings, pretty soon you can change somebody's feelings about their mom. And so I think that's what's happening here. There's things that people go, oh, I don't think that I would ever change my belief system in God. But we've looked at so many pieces of media that have negative opposite things of God. And it's like, over time, how can that not change you?
Yeah. I'd like to push back on what you said a little bit, Keith. I'm curious about your answer. What would you say, do you think it's fair to say that the anxiety that those students were getting was not necessarily directly because of the phone, but what the phone represents? Connectivity, information, X, Y, and Z. So removed all those things that they've attached
But
to
that's
their phone.
assuming that they don't have those things if they don't have the phone.
Right. So it's gotten to the point.
So
is the
if you
problem
remove my phone, can I not connect with people anymore?
Depends. Context, I suppose.
Right. And I would say most college students, most Americans that are living in a modern age, you remove this, what do I still have? Still have an iPad. I still have a computer. I can still communicate with people. It means I'm not getting necessarily phone calls
group it all
right
together.
here.
Remove electronics.
Remove everything.
If you went on a media fast, that sounds like heaven.
Go backpacking.
It does to me.
But think, you remove all media. Let's say you're on a college campus away from home, so you think that you're losing connectivity to whoever who's off campus, or if that's how you do your studies, you're online and all this stuff, all these things. Granted, someone could say go to the library, but do you understand the question? I'm thinking of someone who might come up with that, like, oh, it's not that I'm addicted to my phone, like the thing,
but your life is so wrapped around it.
My life is wrapped around this thing, my calendars and all of that.
I want to ask, is it real connectivity?
Yeah.
Or is the brain perceiving that as a social bond that was made through that text, through that post, through that social media interaction? And in reality, God designed for us to be in person, face to face, and hugging and loving the people that are closest to us. And throughout history, the human social sphere has been pretty small, 100, 150 people that I know pretty well. And then within that circle, the people that I'm tightest with. And now we have the hundreds and thousands, and we call that social, when really, that these forms of media are good to get truth out, to communicate in an efficient manner. So it's not a condemnation of it all, but we shouldn't call it social. I've begun referring to it as anti-social media because it is anti-social. And when college students are taken off social media for 1 week, just 7 days, no social media, their loneliness scores drop 36%.
Why is that? What happens in place of?
I think you know the answer. Yeah. Why do you think?
Replacing the void. So now that this is not in my life, I'll probably go out more, interact with people.
Bingo.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Scotty, you brought up a comment that probably a lot of parents watching might resonate with, of you take the device away from the child, whether it's a toddler or a teenager, and boom, there's a tantrum. Like, can you address what a parent might feel, or any solutions to that? Maybe the cause. We've talked about the cause, but if there's any other causes or connectiveness.
A teacher. You take away the stuff from a student, what happens?
Yeah, and they'll recover. It
That's
is
good. You just say that again. Like, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, just you haven't destroyed the child.
Yes.
Just make a decision now to do life differently, and their brain will develop and come alive. In fact, there's a study in Los Angeles. They took kids out of the city, out of the classroom, out of the media inundation that we live in, and just took them into the mountains. Took them on a camping outing, and as a group, and they were to socialize exercise and do team building exercises, no media. Half the students, 5th graders, half of them are in that experience. The other half are back home as the control group in their desk, playing their video games at home after school, etc. And they looked at emotional intelligence because that's one of the big concerns about the children. It's temper tantrums are emotional self-regulation issues, but there's also emotional intelligence challenges, facial expressions, eye contact, human communication, verbal and nonverbal, non-screen, real human living and socializing. They found after just 5 days, their EQ scores jumped in just 5 days. There's Dr. Victoria Dunkley, who's done Reset Your Child's Brain. And parents come to her with their adolescents or their children with all these diagnosed and named addictions and disorders and depression and all of it. And they don't come to her for a pharmaceutical solution. She's the lady that does the media fast. 3 weeks, no media. 80% of her patients have the majority of their symptoms gone in 3 weeks.
See, this is the beauty of God. He creates a system with neuroplasticity that you can actually, you get yourself in trouble and God goes, you know what? If you just take a break, back off and try my ways, you can change them.
Yeah. And then there's also the character development issues that come with the, okay, well, you threw a temper tantrum, so I'm just going to give in. And what kind of behavior are you reinforcing as a parent? You know, that's guess what? The next time you've already showed them, guess what? All I got to do is throw a temper tantrum to get what I want. So how long does that continue throughout their life if they do that in the entirety of their home experience? They just start to do it with their friends. They start to do it when they get older.
I saw a video of a little kid that was telling his dad, you take my iPad, I'm going to hurt you. Nice. It's like this little kid, you know, it is like, what? I mean...
So my next question is, and then what? So the parent takes away the device, or the whole family goes on a trip, 5 days, they see the positive effects.
Yes.
But then you go back home, you know? Or what if the child has their classes online or whatever? So they need to have access to that media. How do you balance it out so that the tantrum isn't reinforced or anything like that?
It's a lifestyle. It's not a one-time solution. There's a book called The Tech-Wise Family by Andy Crouch, and he has what's in there called the 10 Tech-Wise Commitments, or I think he calls them commitments or commandments, one of the two. He's kind of playing off the 10 Commandments. Anyway, he was the executive editor for Christianity Today, and their family's lifestyle was not built around media, right? So you're probably familiar with the quote, Anton LaVey calls the television the satanic family altar. So in their home, they made the decision when they kind of saw the early stages of like, oh boy, this stuff is coming. So he's like, okay, the center of our home is filled with things like paper and pencil, crayons, musical instruments, all this kind of stuff, so that it's filled with things that help the child be creative and expressive. But the other things were not in the center of their home. They were on the periphery, as he said. He calls them the glowing rectangles. So they made the decision that they would not have a television in their house until their youngest child, was in double digits. And he tells a story of his daughter, her friend comes over, and the television, when they got it, it went in the basement. So it was kind of like out of sight, right? Out of sight, out of mind. So much so that his daughter, when she had a friend come over, the daughter asked her, hey, do you want to go downstairs and watch something on TV? And his daughter looks up at her friend and she's like, we have a TV? Which as a parent, what he was trying to accomplish is a very proud moment for him, because it wasn't in the forefront of her mind. And that's why I say it has to be more of a lifestyle. Like your lives don't revolve around that thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And instead of TV being the center of the home, the full-time parent, especially with those little children, the presence of that parent, the loving attachment that takes place is essential, is critical for all child development measures. Mm-hmm. And in our house, it's funny, you mentioned the TV. We got a TV, and we don't have TV. We don't have the services, but we also have a felt board. Remember the felts, like the flannel graph, and you put up the little Joseph with his multicolored coat. And so we've got the little one who does the felts, and behind the felt board is the TV screen. So people who walk into our home would not even know we have it. But hey, we want to watch a really good sermon, or we want to watch a nature video together. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting when you actually consult the sort of tech gurus in Silicon Valley, the young adults with the kids in the home, how do they do life differently? It's more like what you're describing. They put their kids in the Waldorf school where they're doing gardening and pencil and paper, and they're not high-tech families like the rest of us are. And famously, Steve Jobs said, my kids have never used an iPad. Bill Gates, his kids, only 45 minutes. Isn't that amazing?
Bizarre. It's like the people making it are the people who are most protective of it
Oh,
in
they
their
sure
own
are.
family.
Because they recognize more than anyone else like how powerful it is. They're leaning into that, going, this thing's gonna take off by storm.
It's also hypocritical.
Absolutely. Intentional about destroying other people's lives, but you want to keep yours as a perfect sanctuary.
I want to ask you, what is the percentage that parents actually get with their kids? I can't remember the numbers, but I think it was like something ridiculous. Like they spend 15 minutes a day with a kid.
It's not enough. In fact, teens are spending twice as much time on their smartphone than any conversation with their parent, all time with their parents combined. But it goes both ways. Sometimes I get the call like, we got to have Brother Ritsema come and do the Media on the Brain seminar because our young people. And then you look at the data.
Parents.
Okay, in 2016, we reached the point, and it's even higher now during COVID especially, but it was 9 hours per day for teens for entertainment and social media. 9 hours per day.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Parents are nearly 8 hours per day of entertainment and social media.
Right.
Parents are spending twice as much time just watching Netflix than all quality time with their children combined.
You as a parent have a lot of, your kids are going to do what you do, right? And then some. So if you want them to not do that, if you want them to read a book, you need to read a book. If you want them to go play outside, you should go play outside.
With them. Yeah.
Especially since sometimes, for some people, they think that is quality time, sitting down and watching a movie with my kid. Like that's quality time. So they're both, leveling up on this media. Keith, a thought that came to mind as you were speaking is a parent might think, oh, but I need to have these elements in my home, or else my kid will have problems making friends, or they might start getting bullied, or they might get out of touch because X, Y, and Z. And my home was similar to as you described. We didn't have a TV in the main living space. There are so many lessons that can be learned about healthy boundaries, about how to find healthy friendships when you're put in that context where you have to speak up that you're different, And so if the goal should be, as you're training up your child, so they can make it through life, not just in this context of childhood. And so if you invite children over to your home, not only is that a witnessing opportunity or just an opportunity to learn a different lifestyle, but it's also how can you teach your child how to handle that confrontation of, oh, how about we watch a movie? Oh, there's no TV. How about we color or what have you? And see, first off, children are pretty forgiving, number one. They're pretty adaptable, number two. And once given the opportunity to understand why something is happening, why something is different, they're pretty open to go along with it. And so I think we've become very limiting in our teaching of little people, little children, not understanding that they're going to grow up to become adults in society. And we need to make sure that they're fully functioning and able to stand up for what they believe and what they know is right. And that starts from toddlers,
And getting them plenty of interaction with people of all ages. We do them a disservice when we collect them and segregate them into kids only of their age in their class and school.
I agree.
And so they're either on a screen or they're surrounded by only their immediate peers. I just had the privilege to take my kids on a mission trip, and it was a young adult ministry that I was the speaker for. But I said, hey, can I bring my kids for the mission trip part? And we're painting and we're working on a building, and my kids are interacting with all these young adults. And with youth at other times, and with littler kids than them at other times. And they've got their actual grandparents, and then grandma and grandpa so-and-so, and grandma and grandpa so-and-so, and over here is uncle and auntie this and that, and beyond your family. So I really believe in the home education model, not as a way to prevent socialization, but as the best form of socialization. When kids are staring at screens and they're age segregated, that is harmful to socialization, actually.
Yeah, I think most churches, they do have a problem by separating everybody out. I don't like the idea that you don't have the churches interacting with the elderly and with the youth. And, sometimes it'll be like, oh, this is a youth thing, and they're over there doing that. I've learned so much by hanging out with old people.
Yes.
Yep.
And actually, they're
you guys.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I know. No, seriously. I mean, I remember the days that there was no cell phones or technology in our pockets. How about you?
We used to dial the phone. We would dial the phone.
Exactly.
Did you have a friend with a lot of zeros and nines?
Yeah,
You're like,
man.
man, this takes forever.
But no, I think it's something that we need to encourage, and I think it's something that if you do this with your children, you take them to functions like that, and you integrate them with other people, you'll see their personalities start to blossom.
We'd like to show it to you today for the first time, and we call it the iPad. Steve Jobs in 2010 was on the stage at the Apple event releasing the iPad, and he described it as a wonderful device that brought you educational tools. It allowed you to surf the web, it allowed you to watch videos, it allowed you to interact with other people. And he basically said it's the best way to do all those things. 2 years later, when he was asked, your kids must love the iPad, he said, actually, we don't allow the iPad in the home. We think it's too dangerous for them, in effect. The reason why he said that was because he recognized just how addictive the iPad was as a vehicle for delivering things to people. That once you had the iPad in front of you, or when you took it away from the home with you, you'd always have access to these platforms that were very addictive, that were hard to resist. So where his kids were very well adapted, well adjusted, may not have been prime targets for, say, substance abuse, they, like everyone else, are susceptible to the charms of something like an iPad and what it delivers.
So the question is, why are Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, the people who are creating these technologies, why are they so strict with their kids' media when you think they might want to pass on these things to their children?
Well, this isn't some secret hidden knowledge. Like the American Academy of Pediatrics has said for many years, please no media for children under the age of 2. And that's not going that far. I think they're being pretty wimpy on that, if you ask me. In fact, there was a period of time where the AAP removed that recommendation. The child development community and scientists and everybody who knows the research on this was up in arms. They're like, AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, the guardians of children, how could you withdraw that recommendation of please no media before the age of 2? And then they put it back on. So they responded to pressure, not science.
That's unfortunate.
World Health Organization, some problems there for sure. But one thing they got right is please no screen time for children before the age of 5. They said the less the better before the age of 5. So these, when you interview these, not just Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, but like I was mentioning, the engineers at the Silicon Valley firms, you say, why do you do it the way you do it and what ages? They are waiting till later. And the key is the stimulant level. If you've got a nature-paced video, research on that does not show harm. Like Mr. Rogers' paced, screen time, and Mr. Rogers is even slower than nature, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Dimitri Christakis at Seattle Children's Hospital many years ago has shown when children are watching cartoons, when children are watching regular entertainment videos, not to mention interactive screen time, which is an even higher stimulant level, it is harmful to their attention span, which is a proxy for saying hurting their frontal lobe development. So they will have more tantrums, they will have less emotional self-regulation, more disruptive moods, and all the problems that go with inhibited frontal lobe. So Christakis found, though, when you have a control group that's watching Mr. Rogers, they don't have those same attention span hits that the kids who are watching the cartoons and the other videos. So it's stimulant is the key.
He was kind of early coming out about iPads too, and like concerns with there, but he started to back off his stance based on exactly what you're saying was content. So a FaceTime video interaction is a different thing on an iPad than you're playing Call of Duty.
Sure.
It's a different thing. Your brain perceives that differently.
Yeah. He linked percentages of attention deficit for every hour was 10%. So if you're playing with this stuff for 2 hours out of the day, that's 20%, 30%, so on and so forth. And you being a teacher, attention is the key.
Yeah, sure is.
And now you have this, generation of people coming up that just literally can't pay attention.
Well, to me, it's not just the attention span problems, but it's what else that means. Yeah. Attention span deficits, because of environmental factors of overstimulation, are doing harm on so many levels. So many people would be like, I don't really care to read a book, so what? And it's just for the kids in school. And I'm going, no, if you are shortening your attention span, the average attention span in the industrialized world is now 8 seconds. It's shorter than that of a goldfish. Time magazine. And so all of us are harming our prefrontal cortex, which is going to be where we engage in impulse control. If we want more self-control in our lives, we need that prefrontal cortex.
And you think about what that spills over into, just going to church, listening to stuff.
Totally.
Hey, here's a ministry video that's an hour. Oh, that's too long. I can't watch that. It's like you're going to have attention problems throughout your life. So I think that the parenting, if you guys are out there and listening to this and you have young children, I hope that you'll take these things seriously, look into them, because, building those things into your children and good habits, good media habits, or good just going outside and doing good things is going to have a lifelong lasting experience. But I like what's come out of this conversation as well is if you have a problem, you can fix it. Mm-hmm. So start today. Just make those changes today and you can begin to move forward and reverse some of these things.
Just nature and fun. Mm-hmm. It's not that complicated. Mm-hmm. Be outdoors, be together, and have a happy time, and kids come alive.
Mm-hmm. It could be said that we're going back to extremes, and that's you have someone who's super addicted to technology, and then the other extreme is no tech at all for 5 days. For someone who can't do that practically, is there a way to get there without, disengage for 5 days in nature?
Are you talking about children?
Family. Children, yes, and then as a whole. If
I don't know anybody that can't, unless they're just like they've expended all their vacation time. You go on a vacation, you go on a 5-day backpacking outing, and you leave the phones behind. I mean, do something. Just try something radical. Okay. I'm not saying never use a phone again, but just see what happens when you do go. We're going to go as strict as humanly possible on this and do something radical. You'll see the fruits, and then that'll make you want to get back to your normal tech use life with proper limits.
I think maybe to address maybe what she's getting at is there are people where they've never camped.
That's true.
True. They've never, if you're urban inner city, this is your life, tall buildings around you, you go through a metal detector, go to school, this kind of thing. The countryside is something you've seen on the video screen or you've saw pictures in books.
Yeah.
So what do you do if you're in that context? Because going camping is what?
Okay, yeah.
Are you kidding me? What?
Two things to that, and that's a really good point, because we've got an issue of access. We've got an issue of the underserved here, and I mean underserved in nature exposure.
Yep.
And what they found in studies is in that urban setting, the closer you live to a park, the better your outcomes.
That's a great practice.
Just a park. Just start with a park. Just like we go to the park every single day. We go for a walk in the neighborhood where there are a couple trees growing and the birds are singing, even in the city. So start small.
Yeah.
But also I want to speak to those who have the means and can reach into those urban settings and help and mentor people into how to experience nature, because you can't blame somebody for being born in that and not knowing. It's you got to help people along in that context.
Right.
So
exactly.
Yeah, shout out to Pathfinders. That was my camping experience. They would take all the kids in the church, let's go go for a weekend.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. My kids are in Pathfinders, and it's funny to see the kids. There's tons of kids that have just never done that.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, parents, get outside. Come on. But yeah, there's parks in almost every city. There's somewhere you can walk. I mean, if you live in a neighborhood, walk outside. I mean, just to get outside, go ride a bike. Usually you can get within a close proximity to some kind of nature, probably in a very short distance from where you live.
I used to teach in the inner city, and I'm from Michigan, and we got Lake Michigan. It's one of the most beautiful places in America. People don't understand how beautiful Lake Michigan is. Sandy beaches. It's blue, like you're at the ocean. You go to Sleeping Bear. I mean, I'm right now from the Chamber of Commerce here, right? I just love my state, and it's so beautiful. And these kids were an hour and a half, and less than an hour and a half from the lakeshore. They'd never seen Lake Michigan.
Wow.
I thought, this is a tragedy.
Yeah.
This is not okay. And then they did have this particular urban school district had a campsite that was owned by the school district. It was kind of like a getaway, a place where you can take the sixth graders, and they all got, I was a sixth grade teacher, my first year teaching, and everybody goes out in sixth grade for one outing to that place. Now, these were kids who were really struggling, and this is 2003, so this is before the digital revolution. But they're from struggling homes, fatherless homes, many of them just in those underprivileged situations, behavior problems in the classroom. As soon as we're out there, It doesn't take 5 days.
Yep.
They're coming alive.
Yep. Right.
And so that's just a beautiful thing because there's so much research. This isn't just anecdotal.
Right.
There are thousands of studies on nature exposure and the benefits to your brain, to your happiness, to your behavior.
Right. We're picking on media here, but it's not just media. Like my kids are 14 and 12. And they're at that age where it's like, he looked at me, she did this, she talked to me, she touched my stuff. And I mean, it's like fight, right? I kick them outside. It's like all of a sudden they get along.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Like, what, like, is it the sun? Is it the what?
Yeah.
It's something in the air, but it really does solve a lot of things just to spend a little time outside.
It sure does. Negative ions in the air, fresh air, sunlight, green. Even if you're indoors and you're surrounded by green in office settings, it reduces stress. Even if you're near a window, I mean, you get measurable benefits.
What about neon?
Kendy's like, we need more plants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cut a hole in the ceiling.
That's right.
We talked about the different effects of media addiction, or like society being so engrossed in media, and the people who are controlling it. Well, they're getting money and power and all these things. Can you touch on what is? Can you touch on the effect of collective thinking versus individuality?
Oh yeah, the group mind. This is Edward Bernays, and I was a history teacher before I was a Bible teacher, and I would teach my students about the 1920s and mass popular culture, and this nephew of Sigmund Freud named Edward Bernays, and how he, in his book, he wrote a book called Propaganda, so this is not hidden, this is not, not some secret thing. He said, we are there to control the group mind, and they won't even know about it.
Wow.
He says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. And he says, we are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we have never heard of. That was 100 years ago. They had techniques in place to do that 100 years ago. How much more today? Sure. You were mentioning these guys who go to Stanford, they're all in the same class, and they're in the persuasive technology laboratory, going to then work for big tech. Persuasive, by the way, if you're doing things unconsciously, manipulating people's behavior and choices, that's not persuasion. I believe in persuasion. Come now, let us reason together, the Bible says.
And Bernays was peddling his wares to big companies and, giving them the idea that, we have to make sure. I have a quote that I share with people. It's from the 1929 Harvard Business Review, where he's basically saying, we have to teach people to want new things, to desire new things before the old have been entirely consumed, right? And I always ask people, when do you think that was written? And I get a variety of answers. A lot of people guess like the 1950s, and I tell them, it's 1929 Harvard Business Review. And when you go through the quote, you're like, did it work? And they're like, yeah, it worked.
Yeah,
it worked, hook, line, and sinker.
Why is it inherently wrong? And if so, why? Group thinking.
They should have ethics classes next to those persuasive classes.
They sure should.
If you're doing things causing the group to do harmful activities, that just seems wrong. And I know Edward Bernays, one of the things that he helped, women didn't smoke back then, I think is what his big thing was, teaching the cigarette companies how to make that acceptable in society. Well, you're ruining people's health.
So you could use that technique to maybe push society in the right direction or make people do the right thing.
I think everything that we experience in psychology and the way our systems work and everything, right? God created that system. Mm-hmm. The devil is perverting that system. So, I mean, imagine if everybody was exercising and doing good things, and the groupthink was like, hey, go out and help your neighbor, do good things. I mean, society would change like that, right?
But what if you're so accustomed to just going with the group and it's always making the good choice, but then the 99th time out of 100, they are going the wrong direction? You're not prepared to stand alone.
That's right.
So, that's why we got to be transformed, not conformed.
That's right.
The Bible doesn't call us to be conformed to that which is good in society, only that which is God.
That's true.
So we behold him, we become changed. What we behold, we become more like, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're looking at our fellow man, which direction are they going? Taking my cues from the trends on social media. And I like Gen Z, by the way. I really like Gen Z.
Yeah,
when I started doing media on the brain seminars, it was my millennial younger friends. We're X, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we just got to get things straight here. Are you millennial or X?
I'm like borderline. It depends on
So we have
what
no
year you
millennials
take
here.
as a definition.
We got Z and we got X.
What I notice in myself is because I'm kind of close year wise.
Okay.
I have traits of both.
Traits of both. Good. But you know, a lot of times the young people could not stand the media on the brain. So big bad media on the brain, guys. Scott Ritsema is coming. But then I noticed recently, I go to an academy, a young people speaking to high schoolers, and they're coming up to me like, "This is super helpful. You know, we see this in our own age group, and how can we? You know, it's engaging in dialogue and interest, and that Gen Z has an openness because they didn't know life without this stuff, and so they're skeptical of it. Not everyone, but it's more so than the millennial generation. I love everybody, by the way. If you're listening to this and you're millennial, it's probably half the audience, but I love everybody, and I don't think that highly of Gen X because honestly, we were latchkey kids and have an excessive independence sometimes, an obnoxious individuality, and so we can talk about the collective and the group mind is so bad, but also we got to find a balance as well. But Gen Z's challenge is too collectively thinking, too much going along with the group. And so develop that strength of character as an individual is how I would admonish the young people today and say, be willing to dare to be a Daniel, you know, dare to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because the times are coming in prophecy where you're not going to have the support and the comfort of your society, of your peer group, of young and old. I mean, the arm of flesh will fail you, and every earthly support will be cut off. So, but not Jesus.
That's right.
Every earthly support. So you stay connected to Jesus. He tells you who you are. Your identity is found in him. Your strength grows up in him. And then you serve your fellow man instead of follow.
That's good. And the training for that, the preparation starts now in the home with the children.
Yeah.
I like what you said earlier. There's a difference between persuasion versus manipulation. And when it comes to answering the question, is inherently wrong? I would say yes. I mean, manipulation in any form is wrong. And you brought up going down to the end times when we have to make just salvation in general. It's an individual decision, and Christ looks at the heart. Is this person genuine in their decision, or are they just going on with the crowd? And you brought up, come, let us reason together. God is in the business of persuasion, presenting all the facts, and you make a choice. Whereas now in this generation, it seems like it doesn't even matter whether the facts are true or not, or if there's any facts at all. If everyone's walking down the street, hey, I'm going to join with them, even to the point of not even questioning why.
So let me ask you a question. If we could use hypnotism in an evangelistic meeting to persuade, to get everybody to accept Christ, should we use that method? Why not?
Absolutely not.
No.
Yeah.
Taking away choice.
Yeah, exactly. God is all about free choice. I mean, that's what this whole mess that we're into right now is demonstrating, is God's ability to say in a heavenly environment, it has to operate under free choice. And there's going to be people that are making the wrong choice. I don't think it's right to force somebody or to manipulate them, because then you're just creating robots.
So true. And you know, there was that documentary, The Social Dilemma, and you get all these whistleblowers, like we were talking Sean Parker earlier, and a number of guys, James Williams, and they're all coming out, Tristan Harris, and these guys are saying this is manipulation that's going on, and they're conscience stricken about it.
Yeah.
And so to have, you know, Edward Bernays tell us what he's doing as some sort of evil genius sounding guy, and then these other people who are saying, you know what, there's a problem here, and you need to think about how you are being programmed. That's a direct quote from one of them.
Yeah. So yeah, be careful what you read, be careful what you watch. It all has influence, you know. And so what I always tell people, you know, what do you want to be more influenced by? Do you want to be more influenced by God, or do you want to be more influenced by the world? Because like you said, you're going to conform to what you're beholding. So at the end of the day, that's the principle.
You guys taught about mirror neurons, didn't you? So,
we do.
Yeah. It's like what you see, your brain takes it in as if you are doing it yourself, not just seeing it.
So you talk about it. Do you talk about it in the context when children are very young?
All of the above. Yeah, but especially they're more impressionable at that age.
Yeah. So when they're young, so for our audience, those that maybe have never heard of this, mirror neurons, especially important when children are young, because these are neurons that are very active, and they have motor neurons too. So they're learning to move and those kind of things. But motor neurons also have another function. Motor neurons are involved in conventional judgment making. So frontal lobe activity. The problem is they're not as active in the conventional judgment making as they are their physical development, but the mirror neurons are very active. It's monkey see, monkey do neuron. That's the nickname. And so when a child is very young, you'll know this, you know, why does a little girl want to take care of a baby? Why does a little boy want to work with tools, right? Because they saw mom and dad do that thing. Whatever they're observing, that's what they're doing. And so it becomes very important. That's why I tell people, you can never tell your child, don't do as I do as I say, right? Never works, because children are biochemically wired the exact opposite way.
That's true.
Which then matters what kind of content you're watching. If you're watching people do sinful acts, if you're watching people do awful things, then, you know what I mean? Your brain is interpreting that and actually acting as if it was doing it itself.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, Jesus was way ahead of that, because he said, you have heard that it was said, don't kill, don't commit adultery, but I'm telling you, don't even have those things going on in your heart, lust and hate toward others. So it's really, the commandments are written on our hearts for a reason, because God wants to transform our minds, not just our behavior.
Right.
And so that idea that you will be affected by it, it's a law of the mind. There's no way around it. And it might be imperceptible. You might not notice it, but you might be the frog in the pot.
Right.
That's imperceptible, but the frog ends up dying.
Right.
It all starts in the mind. Whatever's in the mind will eventually become those actions, that will become those habits, that will become who you are, your character.
And so that speaks to the point, I'm just watching it, I'm not participating in it. It speaks to that principle.
Absolutely.
Well, it's in your heart.
Yeah. Well, and are you funding it as well? You're participating in that respect.
Romans 1:32 says, knowing the judgment of God, they which commit such things are worthy of the judgment, that they're doing those bad things. You're worthy of that judgment. And then Paul brings it one step further and says, not only those that do those things, but those that take pleasure in them that do them. So I think that there's more than just actually going through the activity. If you're like rooting on that person to do that awful, evil thing, and I mean, movies nowadays, it's just like, I mean, how many times have people sat there, and we hear this all the time, looking through Netflix? You spend an hour looking through it because it's just junk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just awful. I can't even find something wholesome to watch, I think it matters.
You still do presentations?
Yes. We're doing more digital presentations now. I did 10 years or so of the brick and mortar, 400 plus churches, and traveling all over and saying bye to my family and saying hi to my family. And I still do presentations. Yeah.
What's the name of your ministry?
Belt of Truth Ministries.
And if you actually fact check what he says, you will come to the same conclusion that we all have come to for this.
Right.
And so, Belt of Truth Ministries. Check out, you've got also a YouTube page where you've got a lot of material on your YouTube page.
Yeah.
So here's his YouTube page. We'll put a link to the description below. But what are they going to find on your YouTube page?
A lot of media stuff and Bible teachings and current events and prophecy, study of history and social control, mass formation, parenting seminars, just miscellaneous topics. We're doing health topics as well. So it's a smattering. It's a smorgasbord, a veritable feast of goodness and truth. We named ourselves Belt of Truth Ministries instead of Media on the Brain, because I'm like, there's no way I'm going to only want to talk about media. If we're going into ministry and we're going to do this, I want many topics. Leave the media thing. You guys are the real experts on that. We ended up with more invitations on media than on the other topics, but I love talking about them all.
Awesome. Belt of Truth. Check it out. You will not be disappointed. A true teacher from the heart. And thank you for coming by and blessing us with your information. Obviously, we could sit here and circle around and talk about these for a long time, but we hope that the takeaway is that you'll take seriously that media is not just some form of passive entertainment. It actually has an influence upon our brains, our decisions, and look into this. If you have young children, look into this, fact check it, watch the videos, and then go by and do a little bit of internet research. We live in an amazing day and age where you can research stuff pretty easily. And so check it out, and please, if you want to communicate with him, you can leave him a comment, and we'll put a link to where you can get a hold of him as well. But like this show, if you want to share this with somebody that you know, someone has small children or wants to be blessed by this, please share this information with them. And one way you can help our ministry out is just hit that little like button, and also the subscribe button if you want to see more content like this. If you have any questions, we want to answer those questions for you as well. But we thank you guys.
You're wearing a cool shirt, Scotty.
Oh.
Where'd that from?
Check this out. We've got some threads that we We like to make in our ministry, we have another ministry called Lightwear, and you can find those at lightwear.shop. Mine particularly here says the 7th day Sabbath, and
Keith too is rocking some.
Yeah, Keith's rocking one as well. And so lightwear.shop, you can get a hold of those, and just a cool way to wear God's word on your chest, be a witness, and you never know, you'll get into an interesting conversation. But check it out, like this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
If you're looking for good, wholesome, educational content for your children, subscribe to our new channel, Little Light Kids.